You know, the 19th century was this incredible age of scientific progress and reason. So it begs the question, why were some of its absolute greatest minds just overcome with this profound despair? That's the fascinating contradiction we're going to dig into today.
I mean, you'd think, right? An era with so much monumental progress, new tech, amazing discoveries. It should have been all about optimism. But for a lot of people, the exact opposite was true. A really deep, unsettling pessimism started to take hold. And it made people ask, why? And this feeling, it got so common that it actually earned a name, the Pessimism of Scepticism. It's that sad, kind of hopeless spirit that pops up when the very foundation of religious faith starts to crumble. It leaves this huge void that, as it turns out, science and progress couldn't really fill on their own.
To really get a handle on this, we've got to see how it played out for people on a really personal level. So let's take a look at the private struggles of some of the most influential thinkers of the time.
Okay, let's start with a big one. Voltaire, a titan of the Enlightenment, a champion of reason, and a fierce, fierce critic of the church. If anybody should have been happy in a world that was moving toward his way of thinking, it should have been him. But he really wasn't.
I mean, think about that. Despite all his intellectual wins, his later writings are just filled with this deep gloom. He literally wished he had never been born. The final word from his entire life's philosophy wasn't some triumphant mic drop. It was a groan of despair.
And Voltaire wasn't alone in this, not by a long shot. Let's look at Goethe. To the rest of the world, this guy was one of history's great success stories, a celebrated genius, the whole shebang. But behind that brilliant image was a hidden struggle that lasted his entire life. He admitted that his life felt like the endless, exhausting job of Sisyphus, always pushing that stone uphill but never actually finding any real rest or comfort. And this feeling of pointlessness, it went beyond himself. He had this bleak prediction that God would eventually just get tired of humanity and, well, break it up for a renewed creation. Oof.
Now, for some people, losing faith wasn't this slow, gradual thing. It was more like a sudden, violent collapse. The French philosopher Theodore Jouffroy left this incredibly vivid account of the exact night his entire worldview just shattered in an instant.
He talks about this one frightful night of just relentless self-examination, where every single belief he held dear was just stripped away. His own inflexible thought just wiped the slate clean of family, childhood, God, everything, leaving him in what he called a dark and dispeopled world, an exile in his own life.
So you see how this personal despair starts, but it didn't just stay there. It scaled up. It transformed into this bleak universal worldview, this feeling that the entire cosmos itself had become empty and indifferent. Professor Clifford captured this feeling of cosmic loneliness just perfectly. For him, losing his faith wasn't just some intellectual exercise. No, it was the gut-punch realization that the great companion was gone, leaving humanity to face an empty heaven and a soulless earth, all alone.
Then you have Professor Seeley, who was afraid that this new way of looking at the world could lead to a kind of moral paralysis. I mean, think about it. Once you really get your head around the sheer scale of the cosmos, your own life can feel petrifyingly small. Why even bother striving for happiness if it's so paltry? Why sacrifice for anyone in a cold, indifferent universe? He argued that even our most basic human connections could just wither and die in the face of all that meaninglessness.
And this pessimistic view was a direct challenge to other philosophies floating around at the time. You had thinkers like Auguste Comte, who were promoting a new worship of humanity and all its progress. But then Professor Huxley looks at the exact same history and calls it unutterably saddening. Just a long, ugly story of brutality and misery, where our best moments were just the times we messed up the least. So all of this really boils down to one critical question. With all these old beliefs collapsing and leaving this massive void, could anything actually take their place? What could possibly offer the same kind of hope and meaning in a world without God?
The writer James Sully, I think, really put his finger on the core problem. He argued that even the most noble, high-minded idea, like dedicating your entire life to serving humanity, it just couldn't replace the deep, cheering and sustaining influence of believing in something beyond this life. The loss, you basically said, was just too big.
And that leaves us with a question that's still echoing today, isn't it? These thinkers, they were the first to really wrestle with the emotional cost of a world stripped of its old certainties. And their struggle forces us to ask ourselves, is progress on its own really enough to sustain the human spirit? Or does a truly meaningful life require something more?